Come join us this morning at this sanctuary where we may find peace, hope, and community. Welcome, and good morning, members, friends, and visitors, to our joint service this morning of the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton. I'm Nancy Holland, serving along with our shared minister, Reverend Sue Browning, and we are pleased that you are here with us this morning. My opening words are excerpted from a Quaker Book of Wisdom by Robert Lawrence Smith, who is a former headmaster at the Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. And this book was published in 1998. Regarding the concept of truth, Robert Smith says, "The search for truth is central to a meaningful life. The search for truth is a lifelong pact with our inner lives that encompasses seeking the truth, recognizing the truth, speaking the truth, and living the truth, which is to say, letting our lives speak. We cannot withdraw from the process of living while we make up our minds how to live. All we can do is move forward, guided by whatever inner light we can find to show us the way. We live, however, in a society where it is virtually taken for granted that many of the people we listen to are not telling the truth. We distrust the words of politicians, business people, the press, advertisers, you name it. Most public discourse is suffocated by rhetoric in the service of an effect, and argumentation that insults thought in the service of a chosen conclusion. Facts and truth often seem to be incidental and accidental. In this climate of cynicism, how do we remain true to our best selves? How shall we act on information that we suspect is not true? How do we teach our children the importance of integrity and also arm them against blind acceptance of false claims and information? What is the value of truth-telling, and why should we bother to continue to teach it to our children? Is telling the truth, after all, just a quaint anachronism that has outlived its usefulness? Now please join me as we light the chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts.
But have not So now is our time for Thoughts for All Ages. I'm Reverend Sue Browning, and it is fun to be part of the service today. So Nancy, we have a couple of special days coming up. I'm pretty sure those watching today know that we have Halloween coming up. We've got Veterans Day coming up on November 11th, and between those two dates, we have Election Day. And I don't think anybody's going to miss that it's Election Day. There are signs all over the streets from the candidates. There are signs in people's yards. And the folks that I'm seeing, Nancy, they really want to get elected. They have their names, their views, everything is all over the place. And one of the things I've learned about elections is some of the things that the candidates tell and some of the stories they tell are true. Some of them are true, but I think they leave out a few parts that may not make them look very good. And I think sometimes they actually lie. They just actually don't tell us the truth. And I think it's important for all of us, for everybody of all ages, to remember that we can figure out what's true and false. It might take a little bit of work. So for everybody watching, we're now going to play a game of basic true and false. And Nancy's agreed to play with me. I get to ask the first 5 questions, and then she'll have a turn. So Nancy, just answer true or false.
Okay.
Alaska is the biggest state.
True.
Prince Harry is taller than Prince William. I'm way over in England now. You've watched them grow up. True or false that Prince Harry is taller than Prince William? True or false?
I think that's false based on pictures I've seen.
Okay. Michael Jordan, basketball player, he was actually cut from his high school basketball team.
No way. False.
You're going with false there, okay? A lion's roar can be heard up to 5 miles away.
Wow. Sound does carry. I'll say true.
Okay, here's another one. Ice is slippery. Is that a true statement?
I think so. I'll say true.
Well,
at least most
we
of the
may have a
time.
few of our tech guys challenge you there in a minute.
Most of the time, maybe.
And the final question for Nancy's turn is, the inventor of the light bulb, Thomas Edison, he was afraid of the dark. True or false?
I really don't know, but I'll say false.
You're going to say false. Well, if we were giving large prizes, she did okay. Here's some of the results, and I want to think about how we know these things. Alaska is the biggest state. That's true. We can look that one up. It's got over 600,000 square miles. Prince Harry is shorter than Prince William, and she picked up the trick of when you say true or false, so she gets that right. Turns out, I'm not a basketball fan, I'm guessing Nancy doesn't know the details, but Michael Jordan is an example of somebody who became a pro, but was cut from the team. Yes, you can hear a lion's roar 5 miles away, and I'm going to depend on some scientists who have measured that. I have no clue. The ice is slippery question, I think it's almost always true, but John Ramsey, who's helping us film today, he gave us all the technical cases where that might not be true sometimes. So again, true and false. Is it always true? Partly true. And finally, the story is that Thomas Edison, yes, he was afraid of the dark. But it's a story that's been passed on through literature, through different biographies of him. So those are the answers, and I think Nancy did pretty darn well. But this game wouldn't be fair if you didn't get to ask me a few questions too.
Okay, so now
And we do not have the answers in front of us.
Your turn. In Chestertown, it always rains on Tuesdays.
That is false.
In the United States, 55% of children take a bus to school.
May have been true at some point, but it's sure not true during a pandemic, so I'm going false with my pandemic-based answer.
Okay. All Americans like to vote early.
I'm going with false, just based on a couple of my friends who I know don't want to vote early.
Unitarian Universalists have 7 principles in their bylaws.
That's in the hymnal. That is true.
And Sue and Nancy are both ready for this election to be over.
That is true. So now, as we go forward with the rest of our service today, as you walk through the rest of the election, I ask us to keep an eye on what is true, what is false, and most importantly, how do you know what is true and what is false? Thank you. Now is our time in the service where we have a chance for reflection, a time for meditation, and with so much information all around us, so many places that we are trying to always sift through and figure out what is truth, let's take this moment for quiet. Words this morning by Reverend Scott Taylor. Sometimes it can be so loud, hard to hear those voices you once knew so well, voices that knew you so well. It's said that silence heals us, but silence also holds us together. So pause while we can, while this sweet space gives us room to listen, to hear the echoes of memories that make us whole, the pain of others that reawakens our hearts, the beauty of wild woods that want us back. We don't just listen for clarity and guidance. We listen to become larger. Those voices calling us home are our home. We don't have conversations. We are our conversations. We must remember, friends, who we listen to is who we become. Let's take a moment and reflect on those words. Let's just take a moment in quiet. For the many ways we are community together, for the silence, for the pause, for our conversations. May we be held in something greater than ourselves. Amen, and blessed be.
This is a time in our service that we reserve for acknowledgments of the heart, the sharing of our joys and concerns within our beloved community. I light this first candle, as we have for much too long, for all those who have suffered and are continuing to suffer and deal with the COVID virus. Those who have been ill, who have passed, their families that are dealing with loss, all the first responders who are out there every day, the frontline workers who are helping to protect the rest of us. Our thoughts are with them all. This candle is being lit by Philip to voice concern for a good friend and a UCR Gateway neighbor, Lane Hawkridge, who's the husband of Arlene Lee, who is known to many of us. Lane had a heart attack and a cardiac arrest on Friday. He's in intensive care at the University of Maryland Hospital in Baltimore, and our hearts go out to them both. Christina lights this candle to share the joy that Pope Francis has vocalized his support for same-sex civil unions, particularly when the Supreme Court changes threaten legal protections that we have already gained in the past. It is heartening to hear a leader of a major religious group recognizing the value of unions of love. And for all those joys and concerns that we have not voiced but carry in our hearts. May we have a moment of silence.
We light 2 additional candles today. We light a candle at the request of member Catherine Brooks. Catherine expresses her sorrow at the coming passing of her daughter Joy's husband Peter. She asks for love as his 2 young sons struggle with losing their loving daddy. We hold Peter, Joy, and the entire family in our care. We light a candle at the request of Lynn from the Chester River congregation. She shares, I am so concerned about my daughter Amy's family in northern Colorado as the fires come so close to their home in Fort Collins and their many friends who have had to evacuate in the areas where she often works. Tragic area losses in such a beautiful area.
Blessed be. I would also like to ask that if you have a joy or concern to share, please submit it to the office by Thursday afternoon.
In a moment, you will hear the song True Colors. True Colors is by Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly, and the version that you're going to hear, and you'll actually see, was offered at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Easton as a part of a service on Pride, about claiming Pride during the first Pride Week celebrations on the Eastern Shore. So this was back in April 2019. You'll see Easton's choir working with the Crashbox Theater Kids, which is an educational theater group in the area, and they just did a phenomenal job. And we do know that as a part of the Pride festivities in Chestertown, the Crashbox Theater Kids were absolutely a part of that. The recording was done spontaneously on somebody's phone, so it's a little bit wobbly in parts. We just ask you to hang in there. So we are honored to replay True Colors as part of today's service.
You can lose sight of it all.
So of all the true-false questions that Nancy and I asked one another earlier, I think I have the most confidence in Nancy and I saying that it is true. We are ready for this election to be over. I think it's even more true than knowing Alaska is the biggest state. And I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek, because I sometimes think figuring out what is true is challenging. And as a child, the size of the state of Alaska was something that was really hard for me to grasp, because my information came from a favorite puzzle. I had one of those standard wood puzzles that I think every child in the 1960s had, and you'd see all the pieces, they fit together beautifully. And Alaska and Hawaii were these two little states in the bottom left-hand corner. I recall my dad telling me that Alaska was bigger than Texas. Like, why would I believe that? But I knew it wasn't, because my puzzle was telling me different information. And I think the human mind is like that. If you get the same information over and over, it is hard to imagine something else as being true. Because truth sometimes comes in super crisp, clear facts that everybody can understand. They're super clear. But truth is also about statements of reality. Statements like, it hurts when you break your arm, or it's good to hold a new baby gently. These are truths that are based in reality. They are based in our experience and common sense. And sure, you can come up with an exception. There may be a time that a doctor in an emergency room has to do something different with a baby. But as a general matter, we can hold these things as true. And philosophers over the ages, they've wrestled with the nature of truth. Some consider it virtually, truth is just what we can come up with a fact. But others have looked at truth as something slightly more dynamic, something that stands up to inquiry, something that is useful in our life. However we want to think of truth, I think we have a general common sense understanding of what it is. And that doesn't mean we don't have healthy debates about truth. We can hypothesize on the nature of gravity. So gravity per se isn't a fact, but it's a theory, and apples do continually fall down. On climate change, we can look at temperature changes, we can look at patterns and changes of tide. We could describe the facts, but we could debate the truth on what some of the causes are, because all truths are not self-evident. But there is something about truth I want to talk about today that is times that are grounded in reality. The other thing about truths is we limit ourselves sometimes on what we are ready to take in. Andy Rooney, those of you who remember him from 60 Minutes, said people will only accept facts as truth if those facts agree with what they already believe. I think that is something we really need to think about. When do we take in information, and how do we filter out what isn't going to be happening? Because during this election cycle, truth has been battered. And I think we all need to step back with some humility and realize we all build our cases for those folks that are the candidates we want to see win. But here's the other thing about truth. Our brains can be tricked. If you hear the same information over and over again, we think we're good at verifying and validating truth, but the reality is anybody who hears the same piece of information over and over starts integrating parts of that possibly into their belief system, and they can believe that that's true. We see signs around town, or restaurants under new management or something, and we perceive that that is probably good information. Sometimes it's so important we need to validate it, but often we're just taking it in. We also don't know in the end which parts of the truth will really matter. Where might I do harm? Because the other thing that's happening in today's world is information gets passed on, one story after another. I know one of the stories that's interesting, particularly for those of us who might describe ourselves as leaning left in our politics, there's a blurb that I keep seeing that passes around Facebook, and it's an untrue story about our current president and what he said in a People magazine article in the 1990s. It is just not true. And yet it's appealing to build on that tree of what we already believe. So I think it happens for all of us, that over time we collect bits of information, we go through that process, and we're all susceptible to being selective. So what's your relationship with truth? Do you value truth? Do you value truth even if it is inconvenient? I think Al Gore wrote a book about that title. I do remember my parents saying in my earliest years that telling the truth was important. It was often in the context when I had screwed something up and there was a relative statement, you'll be in even more trouble if you don't tell the truth. So lying was not going to be okay, and truth was not a get out of jail free card, but there was an assumption that I knew what truth was, and truth was the path that would lead me into good relationships with others. It would lead me into my relationships with my family. I was told that not being truthful was a problem. It's roughly equated to honesty. And I can also say, and I'll say this in love, that my dad was a salesman, so he also was fine with building your case one way or the other. There are times that happens, and during an election year, I think we see even more of that. But the truth I worry about is not necessarily just sort of that advocacy piece. It's the deceptive parts. As Unitarian Universalists, we are invited to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. There's an understanding that what I may find is true may be different than what you find is true. It's not all concrete facts, and yet there's an accountability on how we got our information. Even in elections, where stretching this truth is not a surprise, we need to know that particularly for this election and maybe a couple before that, something is askew in the process. There's an author that I've read recently, Vittorio Bafacci, and he writes a lot about something called post-truth. He wrote an article, what's the difference between lies and a post-truth environment? And he actually takes us to a definition they put into the Oxford Dictionary in 2016. Post-truth is an adjective, and it means relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion or personal belief. So I want you to let that sink in for a minute. It's something that's not just stating false things, but it's saying the truth doesn't matter. If it's not sitting well with you and it's not making you feel emotionally satisfied, don't worry about what the truth is. He notes later in his article that there are the incessant accusation of fake news against main media outlets, and these are reflecting a long disdain for truth. The leaders are simply not denying certain facts. Instead, they are determined to undermine the actual infrastructure, the actual way that we operate in our lives. The strategy, and there is maybe not always stated, but it really is lived out in a strategy, is to create an environment where objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion and where scientific information is delegitimatized. This is not new news, but I think it's helpful to reflect because we have this continual flow of information. There's probably been plenty of times in the long history when this was the case, when there have been various populist views appealing to emotion. But when you combine that with social media and the ability to replicate it over and over very quickly, we all have a big responsibility to be careful. Because when we've lost that sense of truth, we have lost one of our foundations. Many of you I know may have watched the recent movie Social Dilemma, which is playing on Netflix. It looks to Google and the other big tech companies and search engines and reminds us that they are playing to get us to click just one more time. We live in a world where folks are trying to make it enticing enough, not based on whether it's true or not, but whether we will get a rush. That they describe it really as candy that's luring us. I mean, it reminds us of Halloween, just to take one more bite, and that's how the manipulation works through. So I know, folks, we come into these winter months. I think we've been inundated. We are looking for some relief. We right now are more than just witnesses to what's going on. I think we're trying to resist this pull against truth, and we are tired. We look to a world, we hope for a time after Election Day when things feel less divided, when there's less lying, less hot air, less distraction from the big issues. And we know that won't necessarily be true. So I think this morning I want to just think about this water that we're swimming in, because it is a bit of a spectacle. As a religious leader, as a citizen, and as a mom, it is not hard for me to advocate and say truth matters. But I think the other thing is countering folks that are not valuing truth with more facts and more fact-checking is not going to be what makes the change and brings us back together. So I think through these times, I think about what is it that's going to ground each of us in these weeks when things are swirling around all over the place, when the world of truth as we've known it feels different. And I think it may come to being solid for yourself in a few big truths. And I don't think that we have to hold religion and science or anything separately. One of the Unitarian Universalist ancestors we often talk about is Joseph Priestley. He was around about 250 years ago, and he was a scientist. He actually was somebody who discovered, so to speak, the presence of oxygen. You couldn't see oxygen, there was no evidence for oxygen, and yet he believed he had the science to do that. He's also somebody who was a religious leader, and he found he could find truth in the value statements, in the aspirational work of religion. So he kept working at both of them, and that became dangerous. Ultimately, somebody burned down both his laboratory and his church over in England. He comes over to the United States. You'd think he might be discouraged, but he went on looking through the truth of science, and he went on looking through the truth of religion as one of the first Unitarian ministers in our country. Because he didn't find there was one path, but there's multiple ways to look at the world. I think that those statements, that ability to discern truth, to understand it not as necessarily an exact science, a place that intuition may matter, are important considerations as we go forth in these next weeks to come. I encourage each of us to really think back. What are the handful of things that you trust? Start with what is true for you. Maybe you do start with Unitarian Universalist principles. You consider compassion, respect, and equity in human relations. Maybe that's a grounding principle. What are the truths and how you get to the truth? Think back to the stories that Nancy and I were telling at the beginning and the true and the false. How do you help your kids figure out true from false? How much time do you do that? Because I think that will be a grounding force in the days and weeks to come. I was looking around at some of the signs in the neighborhoods. I think we should take some of them down, but a couple of the signs have the nature of stating these big kinds of truth that I'm thinking of now. Maybe they're ones that work for you, maybe not. The one that grabbed me most recently was the one that says, science is real, Black Lives Matter, love is love, no human is illegal, women's rights are human rights, kindness is everything. So as we go forward in these next post-election months, my hope is that we make some space for what is true. We give an understanding that we all are susceptible to the repeating stories, and we all owe it to one another to take it seriously and also to be gentle with one another at the same time. May it be so, and blessed be. So as we end our service today, I do want to offer gratitude to Nancy, who has been a wonderful partner as we pulled together today's service, to all of the tech team that helps us with each service, to those who offered music. Thank you, and thank you for the ongoing work to keep our congregations together. And we do ask that you please keep reading our newsletters. It's our best way of communicating in these strange times. So I'm going to offer our closing words. Nancy will then extinguish the chalice, and we invite you to listen to the benediction and the postlude. Closing words. May the blessing of truth be upon us, the power of love direct us and sustain us, and may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again, until we meet virtually again.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts Until we meet again.